Well, the market's falling. We're struggling to find good-looking companies, higher bases, those set to run. But last time we had kind of this much trouble, you picked a bottom pretty well June, July, and it ran hard. So it's kind of a good omen, possibly, if we can find some good stocks. How'd you go?
Yeah, no, so we just sort of, there's probably more just to watch here rather than to jump into. But that gives us sort of, indication as to what we're, if the market's in a pretty heavy sell down here, then the amount of good signals that we should be seeing should be small, which probably is the case. But then there should be some stocks sort of showing some relative strength, and then they should be sort of, leading us away, or some sort of stocks that are holding up quite well in a pretty bad market. They're the ones we want to be looking at. So yeah, but let's go. So look at the quarterlies there. Obviously, ASN, which is what Anson Resources, was the number one. So like a lot of these stocks that have popped here, they've sort of started to cool off. So that GL1 sort of similar, having a pretty, that was a cracking sort of signal that gave us there out of that congestion there on the 6th of September, and had a cracking run to go to a new high. But then, like a lot of the market there, it's all sort of turned down here. Number 3, sort of similar. So I had a good run there and just started to cool off here. So that's a bit of a common pattern there. And we see some there. The one that did catch my eye there last week was this AGY, because of the volume there. So that really strong volume there, Chris. So it has sort of kicked on a bit further. It's gone to a new high. So, what's his name? Davis would be sort of buying this, sort of breaking out to a new high there. So that would have been, closing in a new high there on the 21st would have been a signal there. So this is probably the one that's probably more interesting here, just because it has sort of broken above the previous high, and there's some pretty good volume there. So that's, the market wasn't so negative there. You'd be probably all over that. That's probably one of the best signals I can sort of see there, sort of the ones that have sort of been running and considering here.
And is it also important that it's running relatively against the market? Its relative strength would be huge, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's up there. So that's number 5 there, and that's pretty early too. So you got to think that's in our quarterly momentum, and it's really only that AGY. It's only probably the last month has been the big move here really for it. So that's probably one of the best sort of looking charts I can sort of see there. The other one's pretty interesting there is actually Tyro. We sort of mentioned it previously. I don't really like this sector here, but look how tight that consolidation is there, Chris. That's pretty, and then the volume's starting to dry up here. So considering the market's kind of getting belted, this is holding up pretty well, and it's a nice little tight consolidation here. So if you can still on top of that previous high there, which was around that, what's that, 123 or something there. If you can hold there, sit on top of that, and not really retreat much on low volume there, that's constructive there. So I wouldn't say it's a leading stock here, definitely not, but definitely showing some pretty strong strength there. I like the look of that. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on here. If we get a little reversal here, some volume come in there, there could be another leg on that one. DRE, Dreadnought Resources, that's held up pretty well. Some good volume, some good depth in here. Little small for me, probably, but had a bit of a consolidation. Maybe needs a bit more correction time, but that's sort of somewhat constructive. AMA is another one here, which is pretty interesting as well. AMA Group, kind of building here actually. There's some okay volume in there. So, I had a bit of a spike up here, but yeah, I don't mind looking at this sort of building. Yeah, just probably might go through a little bit of congestion. You might need to sort of see how it holds up here, but not the worst chart there. Sort of just a little small for me. Neuren Pharmaceut was one that we sort of spoke of previously. This little ABC in here, nice and tight, and then started to break up here. That was probably a good little signal in here, and then breaking up to a new high. And this day here would have been confirmation as well. So it has gone on, continue to kick high here. So again, this is performing pretty well in a pretty weak market there. So just probably late stage in terms of coming in. And look, we've still got these coal stocks here, Chris, that are sort of are holding up here. So Whitehaven and New Hope there. The only thing I'll suggest there is a sort of I looked at these charts here just on the weeklies. They're both on 4 ascending trend lines now, so they're getting really vertical. And around, I think I was looking for around the 22nd, I might have been sort of 21st to the 23rd, was sort of, that's exactly 13 weeks on 90 days from the last swing low. So if I'm not mistaken there, that'll be around the, what's that, 20th of June, 21st. And I think the Whitehaven might be the 24th or something there. It was the 24th of June, the last low. So just get nervous when I see these things go vertical up 90 days. That's how these exhaustive patterns can finish here. But look at that. That's just an amazing move here. It's probably one of the most impressive charts we've seen here in the last few years. So, but to me, that just tells me I'll just be tightening up here. I think, you know, at the very least, I'd probably be using that, say, the 20-day moving average there, which is what, 850. So just if it keeps going higher, just keep tightening up, keep your. But I'll just be careful. I think that's starting to look a little exhaustive to me. So some caution there. IGO has gone back to retest the high. Interesting here. Just probably had a good run here. Volumes are okay through here. Just noticed a few stocks in the sector sort of starting to cool a little bit, so that makes me a little nervous. Mineral resources sort of gapped up here to end here. Could be a bit exhaustive there as well. So the weekly, I don't like the weekly here. It's sort of got the sort of overlapping 1, 2, sort of 3. So I'd just be watching these closely as well. They looked a little exhaustive to me. Just a little nervous the commodity cycle as well. Just feel like commodities could be the last thing to break here on the market. So just a little wary of some of those. 29M's held up pretty well, pretty robust. Probably, you want to sort of see a pause here. Some of the stocks that we highlighted previously, like 360, it's had a good run there. It's just sort of consolidating here. They've held up pretty well here. So considering this is probably the wrong sector to be in, sort of technology there, they've actually sort of held on pretty well. So, and this is pretty light selling here. So maybe it'll congest back in here and just work on something. So the 360 is definitely one to keep an eye on here because it might sort of come back into that range. Levis is one that's popped there. A little bit of distribution of selling to me. I think might have been even a director selling in there, which is always a bit of a concern there. If the directors are getting out after a good run, that's always a negative sign for me. Along the lines of 360, Temple & Webster as well has had a pretty good run. Sort of another one that we sort of looked at there. There's a number of high lows in there. So far, we've seen those not starting to pull back here. I think I sort of said to you, the last 3 days up here were on light volume, so it was running at a puff. But the good sign there is that so far there's not too much selling in there. So even though this has drifted off a bit, it's not too much selling here. So this might need to go through a little bit of a correction in time here. So as long as it doesn't come back too deep, it maybe does some sort of ABC, use up a bit of time there, that could be constructive as well. It's definitely showing some relative performance as well. So 360 and Temple & Webster, definitely two to keep on the radar there, just to sort of see how they trade over the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks. They can hold on pretty well while the market gets buried. That'll be a pretty good sign for them. DVP is one that's held up. I think Nitro was another one in that sector as well, bit of a growth one. Had a good result here. And again, no selling in here, so it's keeping nice and tight here. So just might need to use up more time, but those are the sort of the strongest stocks here at the moment on the quarterly, just showing relative strength in the market. So there's a few in there actually to keep an eye on actually. So nothing to sort of do there. But definitely some stocks there that look pretty good and could set us up for a trade here later on there. On the launchpad, so looking at stuff that's sort of moved here this week. Triple L was probably the big mover at number one. They're just starting to cool off a little bit with some of the other lithium stocks. Number 2 was Starpharma. This is pretty interesting here because obviously this is a sector that is biotech's sector which has had some decent moves here. Is one of the leading sectors currently, so definitely want to keep an eye on. It's had a bit of a pop out of the range, some big volume there. Just want to sort of see if this can kind of build from here. NAE was New Age Exploration. Again, pretty small here. Some big volume there. Probably too small for me. AOU. Barak Minerals. So this is interesting here. Sort of starting to build a little bit there. Got a few higher lows in here. Yeah, some impulsive moves, some volume there. Just sort of building here. So this is probably one just to keep an eye on there. But something potentially building. Select Harvest is sort of one that I quite liked here. Got a few higher lows in here. Like the food thematic. I think it's important around sort of particularly high inflationary periods. So this can sort of set up again here. Probably if I sort of come back, sit on top of the previous high, which so far it has done. Probably a bit more time here. But that could be pretty interesting. Definitely like that chart, like the setup. And I like the thematic as well. DRM has sort of had a pop here, just some decent volume there. It's probably around some drilling results. Pretty new company there, so probably one to keep an eye on. GAL's interesting there. It sort of had a pretty, jumped out of the gates there back in May. This is, I think, was sort of that sort of gold space. A couple of big finds in there. Obviously, the gold's been a bit weaker here, but this is sort of one if gold can turn here. Just keep an eye on there. Just start getting a few higher lows in there. Just starting to get a few little impulsive pops in there. And most importantly, was sort of getting a higher low, second higher low, maybe might get a third higher low. So there's not too much selling going on in here, and it's sort of popping on some good volume. So that's
so you're happy to see when it pops on that good volume, it goes up quickly, and then it takes a while to sell down, and it doesn't do it with much volume. Is that good to see?
Yeah, that's right. So it can be constructive there. So sometimes, like particularly in bad markets too, it might just take a while to base. So I mean, it's had a cracking run, it's had a correction in time and in price, and now starting to build again. So potentially it might be able to go again here. So that does look pretty interesting. So but again, we sort of probably need to watch that a bit longer. IMR, which is another one which is okay there, but again, probably a little too small. PPK is actually one that this looks pretty horrible in here. But it is sort of starting to show a little bit of something in here. So I see the volume down here, Chris. That's sort of, when I sort of see it, I mean, that's a massive, massive move down here. So far, it's, looks still pretty horrible. This rally is sort of still sitting below the previous swing low there. But just the volume there, just kind of like, okay, it's sort of come back to where this drive, sort of started here, which is often the case of these sort of big moves, and come back to where it all began. The volume is pretty interesting there. Not too much showing on the daily there, but we are starting to see a few little swing highs in here, but not enough here yet, but just interesting, some volume in there. So this is sort of one that's had a massive correction and just showing some volume here. So it's like, oh, I'm putting this on my radar here. Just it's interesting actually. It's come up in the list, but I was watching this last week thinking this is sort of just showing a little bit of something here while everything else is getting killed. Yeah, too early to be jumping in there, but definitely showing something there to for us to look at there. Again, this too early on KWL. I think APM is actually one that's this is probably more interesting to me because this is sort of like a new float here. So this is sort of the beginning. It's sort of come off and rebounded back, and come off, rebounded back, come off, rebounded back here. So this is interesting because I think it's actually showing some sort of relative strength in the market. It's actually holding up quite well. And this is a float price here as well. So it's been underwater the whole time here. But if this actually breaks out above all these highs, that's what Davis would be looking for, the Davis box there. So looking for relative strength here. So this is holding up pretty well in a pretty weak market. If that closes above 350, that's sort of something which Davis would actually buy. And it's a relatively new stock as well. So APM Human Services, so definitely one to keep an eye on there. So some stocks will sort of outperform here, hold up pretty well. And then they'll be the next leadership group. Then some of them will just get killed like in the bear market, and they'll be off pretty hard, and then you can jump in as well. So normally we're looking for relative strength 9 times out of 10, but in really deep bear markets, sometimes you'll get some of the leaders establish themselves, and you'll also get some of the stocks that have just been beaten up pretty badly. They can still rebound and double in value just because they've been beaten up so hard. So AIZ Air New Zealand is sort of one that I've sort of quite liked here. It's probably one. It is my biggest long position personally. So I'm pretty short across the board at the moment, which is working quite nicely. And this is one of the few longs that I do have, which is working quite nicely as well. So, but I think this looks pretty constructive. I like the travel sector. I think it's sort of in recovery zone. Just like the fact that he was sort of starting to, some okay volume there, nice and tight consolidation. That's what we want to see. We want to see when it corrects there. We want to see no low volume, struggle to go down and then sort of pop up here. So, I think it looks pretty constructive there. I noticed, I think Webjet was on there as well. So again, a bit messy, but still quite like this travel thematic here. So I think here, if you draw a trend line through there, and our top there, we've just got a nice trading band here. So I'll just be watching to sort of see, this happen to come down to say 460, 470, pretty light volume here. Even like a little false break or something down here, I think there's sort of something I'd look at. So, but yeah, just keep an eye on that. I saw Westpac was on the list. I think that's really just the fact everything else has gotten beaten so badly.
Relative performance.
Yeah, it's sort of standing out there. Let's see. It's a small one there, was sort of holding up as well pretty well, but pretty too small. But yeah, so nothing really giving me a rock hard signal there to trade there, but definitely some stocks there that are sort of poking their head out saying, hey, look at me. We just got to watch those over the next week or two here and just sort of see how they hold up in the face of selling here. So market's pretty negative at the moment, under some pressure. So yeah, I think we should be sort of tough pickings here in the next week or two, but then we should start to sort of see some leaders emerge, and then there should be some stocks that are pretty oversold as well. So interesting.
Cool. We definitely have seen that before, and you have picked that before in the last couple of months, where you were saying, look, there's not much to find in this week's list. We're going to slim pickings, but you'll watch A, B, and C. And they ended up being very good trades as the market turned, and they were early leaders. So that's where we dig down, do our homework over the next couple of weeks, prepare ourselves of what we're willing to buy, and then wait for the signals. Is that kind of plan?
That's right. Yeah, so sometimes sort of in a really deep bear move, because obviously like last time we had a pullback there, we had some really good stocks sort of set up and some clear leaderships. So this time, you might get more. It might be less really strong stocks emerging there, but if you're in this is probably going to be a deeper bear market sort of low here, feeling like a bit bearish here, feeling like a bit more of a nastier bear coming. So sometimes you'll get maybe fewer signals in there, but sometimes in those really deep bears, we're not only just looking for the leadership group. We can look for a few others as well that get beaten up as well. Sometimes some stocks can really get beaten up pretty badly, and that they can bounce back here. So but generally the ones that hold up the best, they do typically tend to perform the best.
Yeah, well, that's a good insight into what to look for in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much, Gary Glover from Novus Capital.
Thanks, Chris.
And if you want to see more of Gary's trades that he does put on and how he runs his portfolio, you can click on the right hand side for that playlist, and then also looking at volatility contraction patterns on the right, which is an in-depth tutorial.